Hi readers, it's Lori. Welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, or welcome if this is your first time. Today we're going to talk about a pile of possibilities for you, some recommendations from me for the Mardi Gras Readathon 2025. So let's get started. Okay, so I have taken each prompt and I have selected at least one book that I've already read that I can recommend to you based on my experience with it, and then another book that I haven't read but is interesting to me and one that I possibly could read in my pile of possibilities for Mardi Gras Readathon. You know, I don't stick well to a strict TBR, so I could always change my mind in any point in this process. So let's get to the prompts in order of the way that they are on the graphic that Kat so wonderfully made for me and for all of us. So the first book is American Royals by Catherine McGee. This is a series of books. So if you have if you decide you like this first book, you could certainly go on and read. I think there's four or five in the series, I think, and then there's a novella and a chapter or something. So there's some possibilities for you to go on with this. I think this was considered young adult. Let me make sure that that's true before I tell you. It's for young readers, so let's just maybe teens. But I do remember there was a little bit of spice in them as I went on to the next book. But this one is about what would have happened if when America won the Revolutionary War, they decided to make George Washington a king rather than a president. And so in this speculative novel, it is about this family that has continued from George Washington's realm. Hierarchy has been created for their ancestors up till now, which is Princess Beatrice. And she's actually in line to be the next monarch for the United States. Her brother, who I think is her twin, who is named Prince Jefferson, he is not in the running for that unless something happens to Beatrice, of course. And so this is about her preparing for this thing that she's about to do, and it's about all of the things that go with this. And it's just, I remember it being fun. I gave it 3 stars, so it's not a really super high rating, but I don't read a lot of books about royalty, so this was really the only one that I clearly remember being aligned with that kind of topic. However, the book that I would also recommend that I haven't read and really want to is Diana, Her True Story in Her Own Words by Andrew Morton. And of course, this was very controversial. This is nonfiction. When she and now King Charles divorced, Andrew Morton partnered with her to tell her story. I have always been fascinated with this. I've just never gotten to it. All right, the book for the prompt to read a book set on the Gulf Coast is The Gates of Evangeline by Hester Young. This is the Charlie Cates series. So she has 3 books in this series, and I've read 2 of them, and I need to get to the third because I really enjoyed both of them very much. The second one I think is called The Shimmering Road or The Shimmering something. Book 1, The Gates of Evangeline, is about a woman named Charlie Cates. Charlotte, I think is her first name, and she's starting to have dreams about things that have no connection to her, just complete weird dreams. And she starts dreaming about children. And in this particular case, she dreams about a little boy who's by himself in a boat. And she really gets upset by this, and she discovers that there might be something else to it. So she starts, I think, paying attention, if I remember, because I read this in 2017. She starts paying attention to what's happening in the dreams, and she finds herself then moving south into Louisiana, the southern part of Louisiana, and she starts to look for clues and cues about what might be happening to see if she can find this boy. And I just remember this being engrossing. I gave it 4 stars. I read the synopsis that I wrote and I said it was just like a great batch of gumbo. It was just delicious. It's one I think I would want to read again. This one gives you a good sense of place. I just remember it being very rich and detailed, but also very suspenseful. So the book that I have not read that I am putting forward for you is a surprise for me as well as maybe for some of you. I haven't read a John Grisham book in a really long time, but I did enjoy the first couple that he came out with. I was really a fan. However, I think there just became so many of them and I just kind of dropped the whole thing. I recently, though, saw a newsletter from my local bookstore in North Mississippi, and it's called Square Books. I often wear my Square Books t-shirt. Square Books was noticing that the sales of their books were starting to show who might be the number one book that's been purchased at Square Books for the year 2024. And they always release a list of the books, and there's a number of them. They go pretty far down into how many sold and what ranking they had in terms of sales. So they were noticing that there was some buzz around 2 books in the nonfiction category that were coming toward the top of the list. And one of them was John Grisham's nonfiction that came out in 2024 called Framed, which is, I think it's 10 different stories about people who were wrongly convicted of crimes. It sounds really very fascinating, and I can see why that would end up being number 1. But then they were noticing that a book that I brought forward as a most anticipated read last year was also getting a lot of buzz. And that is the book called The Barn, which is a secret history of the murder in Mississippi by Wright Thompson. And this is about the Emmett Till murder. The reason I picked The Boys of Biloxi was because he wrote and said he couldn't think of a better book to have been chosen for number 1, which was The Barn. It edged him out by just a few votes, I think. And he said, in fact, he had already bought 10 copies of that book for his friends. So he was praising Wright Thompson and said he thoroughly enjoyed that book. Now, for me, that bumped John Grisham up in my little tally of authors that I admire a good bit. Okay, so let's get back to John Grisham and The Boys from Biloxi, shall we? The Boys from Biloxi came out in 2022, so it's been out for a bit, and it talks about Biloxi's sort of nuances and what Biloxi is known for, which is seafood, beaches, casinos, just beautiful weather. Typically, I mean, I do live in a beautiful place here along the coast, so Biloxi is, of course, a great city. But he, in this fictional novel, talks about the vices that people are addicted to and the things that are happening in Biloxi that are a little bit unsavory. Gambling, prostitution, contract killings, and bootleg liquor. Now, I can't say that I've seen a whole lot of that happening in Biloxi, but again, this is fiction. There's a Dixie Mafia. The people that are the characters in this, Keith Rudy and Hugh Malco, grew up in Biloxi in the 60s and were childhood friends, and they played Little League together. Keith's father became a prosecutor, and his goal was to clean up Biloxi from this crazy crime and this Dixie Mafia, which was a real thing, by the way. That's not made up at all. It is a sweeping saga that's rich with history of Biloxi, but also unforgettable characters, and focuses on these boys, but also the history of Biloxi as well. It sounds really good to me. And again, I chose to look at it because it was called The Boys from Biloxi, but I also was more intrigued to look at it because he supported Wright Thompson so sweetly. The next one I don't own yet, but it's on its way to me because I purchased it as a Book of the Month add-on this month. And this is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. I just talked about a new release from her, which I am interested in as well. So this is to fulfill the prompt to read a book about cake. And I read this for the 2023 Mardi Gras. I talked about it then, but I think it's worth bringing back to you today because there's a lot of new subscribers from then till now. Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson is a beautiful story. I gave it 5 stars. I was hooked from the moment I read it, and I actually do own it on ebook as well. Eleanor is the name of the mother, and she leaves behind, when she passes, a story of her life and a black cake, which is a Caribbean custom, and it's a recipe that's been put down through centuries. Now, one of the reasons I love this book because it was a diverse characters read, and also because I learned so much about the sort of the black cake, for example, but also this woman's life was incredible, and the things that she did were just unexpected and wonderful. Oh, I just can't tell you how much I loved this book. So they can't eat the black cake until they've read the entire story. And Byron and Benny have not been particularly close. So they now have to work together and they have to do what's been asked of them to do. And it's quite a coming of age story for them as well. They're very different. They've lived apart. And so they're reunifying in this particularly tragic time and also having to really come to terms with what they're discovering about their moms. Charmaine Wilkerson, I'm sure the second one is going to be wonderful too, but this was one of my all-time, probably top 10 favorites. Now, the next one that I'm putting forward is a part of a series, but it's book 4. But here's why I'm putting it forward to you. Because it could fulfill a number of prompts, all right? So this one was written in January of 2014. Mary Jane Clark is the author. I've never read anything by her. I can't say whether this is good or bad, but it has a 3.71 rating on Goodreads. And this one is called That Old Black Magic. And when you look at this cover, you're going to know. You're going to know why I put this one forward. I had never heard of this book before until I started researching some books that would fit for these prompts. When I saw the Mardi Gras beads, I was just like, oh my gosh. It's called A Savory and Suspenseful Confection Filled with Murder, Mystery, History, and Voodoo. Piper Donovan must unmask a devious killer who's striking in the French Quarter, and she's trying to perfect her pastry skills at the Boulangerie Bertrand. But a murder impacts what's called the Magical City in New Orleans, and there's a hoodoo killer that she has to try to find. I don't think you have to read from start to 4 in the series. I don't know though, so perhaps you should ask some people who you might know that have read it. All right, so the next one is read a book set in France, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I had never read her historical stuff until this book, and it was so impactful for me. I gave it 5 stars, and I have never forgotten it. It was one of those books that afterwards I had a bit of a hangover, and I just couldn't release these characters out of my mind and my heart. But this one it's quite something, let me just say. So it's set in World War II, German occupied France. The characters, Vian is the first character. Vian has to say goodbye to her husband because he's gone to fight. A German captain comes in and requisitions her house. And so she has this man living with her children in her home. That terrified me because I just wasn't sure what was going to happen to her with this man living in her house. It was the first terrifying thing. And then her sister, Isabel, who's 18, very young. She takes off, and Vian isn't sure at one point what's happened to her sister, but she knows that her sister was trying to do something that she felt like was purposeful. She doesn't know if her sister's okay, and Isabel doesn't know if she's okay for a while. And so it's about both sisters. It's really about the experience of people who lived in France during that time. And in particular, these fictional characters really came alive for me. I just can't say enough about this book. So another book that I haven't read that you could read is The Postmistress of Paris by Meg Waite Clayton. I love this author, and I need to get to this one too because it came out several years ago now. I think it came out in 2021. Yeah, so this is about Nene, who was born with a spirit of adventure. When German tanks roll across the border, she joins the resistance. And in joining the resistance, she's known as the postmistress because she delivers messages and mail to people who are in hiding. That's all I need to know about this, but I am going to buddy read this, so this will not be a Mardi Gras read for me. I have this on my list of buddy reads to read in a couple of months, so I'm super excited about that. All right, the next one is about a ball or a significant event, and I thought I owned a copy of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald because it is one of my favorite books about an elegant events and parties, really. I don't own it, apparently. I swear I thought I did. Perhaps I lent it out to somebody. I don't know. But nevertheless, The Great Gatsby is a classic. And I like to recommend classics now and again because I think sometimes we get so excited about the new releases that we forget about the enjoyment of the old ones. And I loved this book. I know it's not for everyone, and I know not everyone loves it, but I really, really do. And I actually thought I had this copy that I'm sharing with you for the screenshot. So I'm really struggling with that. This was first published in 1925. So my mom and dad were toddlers when this book came out. And it was his third book, but it is the one that usually people associate more with him than some of the others. So all I'm going to tell you about this book, because I don't want to spoil anything for you, and I think it's pretty evocative, and it's also pretty mysterious the way that it rolls out. So this book is about Jay Gatsby, who is a very mysterious, very wealthy man, and he throws a lot of parties in his home, and he has a particular connection to and a longing for a woman named Daisy Buchanan. And Daisy Buchanan has her own story about herself and about Jay Gatsby and the connection between them. So I'm going to let you figure that out. And this book, the New York Times says, or said maybe at that time, gin was the national drink and sex the national obsession. So it is a very kind of a steamy, but I think it was closed door, but it is still one of my favorites. Then the one that I am recommending for a ball or an event is also on my backlist, and I was also putting it in my inventory. And that's Silver Wedding by Maeve Binchy. I love Maeve Binchy. She is an Irish writer. Well, she was an Irish writer. She's passed away now for several years. But I have a number of Maeve Binchy titles, and this one is one I've never read. So this is about Desmond and Deirdre Doyle, who've been married 25 years, and their family is going to, in fact, their oldest daughter is in charge of it, which often happens a lot, to throw them a celebration. And so it's about the family and the sisters, the planning of this. And one of the sisters is in a convent trying to become a nun. A brother is in exile on a farm in the west of Ireland. And there's just a lot of different things happening with this family. And so you know how much I love a family saga, a coming of age story, and the connection to them throwing this silver wedding anniversary party is really something to me because my sisters and my aunt, I'm pretty sure, planned a silver wedding anniversary party for my parents. And so I was pretty young when that happened because, again, my parents had me when they were 39 and 40, right? They'd been married a bit, but I remember it. We still have photos of it. And so this one has always kind of stayed in my thoughts, but I've never gotten to it. And unlike some of Maeve Binchy's, it's not super long. And I got this one, I think, at a library sale or a used bookstore. I think it was library just because it has this piece of tape on it. But nevertheless, this is a very well used copy. A book about music is the next category. Again, this one it's polarizing, and I didn't love it as much as some of her others, but I did enjoy it very much. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. I slogged through it a little bit though. This one it's hard. So it took me a year and a half to finish this book. I know. I kept at it because of my love for Ann Patchett, truly. So this is set somewhere in South America at the home of a diplomat. This woman is there. She's an opera singer, and her name is Roxanne Koss, and she's been summoned to sing at this particular event, and her musicians are there too. Musician, I think there's one guy that came with her. All the people that are connected to this embassy and to these diplomats are in this house, this home of the vice president of the country. She's singing and everybody's just, in awe. And then these terrorists break into the home with guns and they're holding them all hostage in exchange for a deal that they're making with the country. It is suspenseful, but it isn't necessarily like edge of my seat suspenseful for me anyway. It could have been the time frame and where I was at when I read it because I finished it finally in March of 2017, but obviously I started it in 2015 or 2016, right? Because it took me a year and a half. I hate to even say that. Like, I hope Ann Patchett never finds out it took me a year and a half to read this book. But when I finished it, I was glad that I did. And again, I gave it 4 stars. I think I just needed to get over the little sort of slow part. All right, so the next one that I haven't read, but I'm putting forward as a possibility for you and for me is The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. This one's been on my list for a while. I think it was one of my anticipated, and it came out, let me tell you when it came out, October 2021. The Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music, is a story about his growing up in Springfield, Virginia, and how he ascended from the band Scream and then was in the band Nirvana for a while and then ended up with the Foo Fighters, who are one of my favorites of all time. And I just love his sense of humor. I love the way he is just kind of really real with people. And there's something about Dave Grohl that's just really always appealed to me. I just think he probably is a really nice person. This one is a solid memoir that I would like to read, and it has a 4.45 rating, you guys, and it's been read by a lot of people. So I have a feeling that this one is really fantastic. Okay, the prompt about reading a book about food. I chose, which this is food, mind you, but I chose Chocolat by Joanne Harris. I was trying to choose books that I hadn't talked about a lot, and I read this one a long time ago. In fact, I can't even really remember how long ago, but I think it was published in the year 2000. So clearly it's 2024, way before I was in Goodreads. So I don't even have a rating for it there, but I do remember just loving this book and I remember being engrossed in it. This one also is set in France, so you could read this for that prompt as well. And I think it would probably cover a couple of other prompts too. But this is also about Vion. Her name is Vion, and she opens up an exquisite chocolate shop in the community. And she doesn't realize that when she opens it, it's the start of Lent. So this is another reason why I thought this would be a good read for you because, Mardi Gras happens right before Lent. The community is very suspicious of her. Like, why would you open a chocolate shop right before Lent? That's just cruel. Also, they think she's a bit of a witch because those who have eaten her chocolate are absolutely consumed with passion for it. I'm, remembering reading it, how much I wanted to eat chocolate while I was reading it. I remember feeling like this book was sort of coming alive in my head. And I could see it visually, and it was just stunning. They did later make a movie out of it, and it starred Juliette Binoche, who I love, and Johnny Depp, who was good in this movie as well. It was very different from some of the movies that he did later after that. Definitely this one stuck with me over the years. I can't say it's one of my top books of all time like some of these others, but it definitely was something I really enjoyed. And it's a book about food and decadent food, chocolate. Chocolat. This book that I am putting into your hands is one that I don't know. I just think this one would be really, really fun. It's historical fiction. It's written by an author I've read before. Her name is Jennifer Ryan, and I read The Tilbury Ladies Choir, which I really enjoyed a lot, and it was set in World War II, as is this one. So this is about how many women? 4 women who are competing in a baking championship called the Kitchen Front, which is based on a BBC program of the same name, and it is during World War II. So many things are happening that are difficult. This program is created to really help people think about something else than the war. And so the prize for this contest, if you win, is that you get a job as the program's first ever female co-host because it's hosted by a man at that time. And so they're competing in this contest, but I'm sure that it also brings them together and they've never met each other before. And that's kind of how the Chilbury Ladies Choir was. It brought people who'd never sort of connected before into something that kept their minds off the war, which is likely the sentiment behind this too. But it just sounds really great. And I love this cover too. I just think it reminds me of everything, in the 40s that I've ever seen before. It's just perfect. And I marked this as want to read in 2021. You guys, I know. That's why this backlist challenge that I'm doing right now is so good for me. So I gave the Chilbury Ladies Choir 4 stars, and I hope that this one will be as good. And I read that one in 2018. So obviously the Kitchen Front came out and I said, oh, I'm going to read that because I love that author. And I never did. So perfect timing. If I don't read it for Mardi Gras Readathon, I feel like it's going to stay on my list for this year. All right, the next one is a thriller. Again, this is Crew or Group of Friends. And this one is Everyone Here is Lying by Sherry LaPina. This was one of hers that I gave 5 stars to. And I just remember being engrossed in this. I read most of hers pretty quickly because they're pretty propulsive. But this one stands out to me as one of my favorites that she wrote. So this one is about a man named William, and he's having an affair, or has been having an affair with a woman for a number of years. He's in this hotel with her on this particular day, and she ends the relationship with him. She doesn't want to do this anymore. She doesn't like lying. It's just not working for her. She wants it to stop. And so he's pretty mad. And he leaves the hotel pretty angry. So angry, in fact, that when he gets home, he takes it out on his 9-year-old daughter, Avery, who has come home all by herself, and she's not supposed to. Her brother is supposed to walk her home, but something happens and she ends up walking home by herself. And again, she's 9. They live in a subdivision, as most of Sherry LaPina's books are set in a subdivision. So he comes home, he finds her home. He's really, really angry about the breakup, and he takes it out on Avery, and she leaves. And then he can't find her, and nobody can find her, and they don't know what happened to her. And now they're starting to suspect that somebody has taken her. And so the neighbors are all, the neighbors are all being questioned about Avery and what they know. And the neighbors also are all lying about something. So William is the first liar that you meet. And then you go through this list of people that are not being honest. And I really, really enjoyed this. The one that I haven't read that I would say would work for this prompt, if you haven't looked at it before, is A Game of Lies by Claire McIntosh. I recently became a fan of hers, and this is the second in her DC, what's her name, Morgan series. So DC Morgan and her partner are going to be in this one again. They say the camera never lies, but on this show, you can't trust anything you see. So not unlike The Kitchen Front, this is about a reality show where a bunch of people come together to compete, and then something terrible happens and someone disappears. That person ends up being murdered, I think, because it says a murderer strikes. But everybody has an alibi in some way, and everybody has a desire to apparently kill this person. So, closed circle, isolated. That's me. That's why I bought it. I can't wait. And this one came out last year, so it is backlist, but it hasn't been out long. And I haven't really seen anybody talking about this one either. So maybe Claire McIntosh isn't for everyone, but ironically, Sherry LaPina blurbed it, as did Karen Slaughter, Sarah Pierce, Lucy Clark, and B.A. Paris. So, it's a thriller too. So 2 thrillers in one space. This next book is set in New Orleans, but a suburb of New Orleans that is imaginary. This is Dead Until Dark by Charlaine Harris. The Charlaine Harris Sookie Stackhouse series is really long and I didn't get through all of them. I got close. We own all of them, so I could always go back and finish. This first book I definitely read and I devoured it, and we had kind of a rolling book club because I read them, my partner read them, and my daughter read them, so we would each kind of read them one by one and then talk about them. Years ago, they were very easy to finish and ridiculous, but I enjoyed them very much. And so this is a horror kind of, not a real cozy though, because it's pretty steamy too, but horror for sure series that Charlaine Harris created that then spawned the True Blood series on HBO, and has been fairly popular too. I will say that I lost interest in it along the way, but Dead Until Dark was the first one and I was really hooked. And I read more stories then about vampires, I think, than I typically do now. Main character in this story, Sookie Stackhouse, works at a diner and she can read minds, which is very troubling for her sometimes because she finds things out about people that she doesn't really want to know. And, just things come into her head all the time that people are thinking. This man comes into the diner, tall, handsome guy. She's really kind of like, wow, look at him. But she can't read his mind, which has never happened before. And she's really kind of surprised by that. And of course, Bill turns out to be a vampire. And so what happens next is a series of things. But in this particular case, this little community of bon ton ends up with some murders. And this is a character crazy book, and all the characters have different quirks and unique stories. And I really did. I really enjoyed it. We got to meet Charlaine Harris too. I think we had her sign a couple of books. She was at a bookstore in New Orleans. And so we went over there and did the meet and greet with her. But I do think if you want to read a book about vampires that is kind of gory, but not too horrible, Dead Until Dark may be a good choice for you. All right, so the last one I would like to possibly read at some point this year, but maybe not for the Mardi Gras Readathon, is Out of the Easy by Ruta Sepetys. I've never read anything by Ruta Sepetys before, but a number of my BookTube friends and people that I watch on BookTube have, and I have always been intrigued by her books. I thought this one would be more like young adult based on the synopsis, but it says it won the Children's Award book of the year for something one year, so I don't know. But this one was published a number of years ago, I think. And yet it has always kind of caught my eye. I marked it though to read, I think, a couple of years ago, so not long ago, that I added to my TBR. I do want to get to a Ruta Sepetys. It just may not be this one first. This is why I'm not sure that this is a children's book versus a young adult book, because it's about a young girl named Josie, and she's the daughter of a prostitute who works in a brothel on Conti Street, which is a very familiar street in New Orleans in the Big Easy. And she's really trying to escape this life, I guess, as the daughter of a prostitute. I'm sure it can't be a good life. And so she's trying to figure out how she can escape New Orleans because it's not her favorite place. Hence, I think why it's called Out of the Easy. But then a murder occurs and somehow she's entangled in it a little bit, but I think her mom and maybe the madam of the brothel are connected to this too. She's caught in this kind of underworld that she's tangentially a part of and also trying to save herself. So it says it's a rich story of secrets, lies, and the haunting reminder that decisions will shape our destiny. It sounds good. It sounds like a book I would like. And again, I if you know, I would love for you to tell me if this is young adult or children's, because it just feels like, I don't know, but it's not that I'm not going to read it. I mean, obviously I'm an adult, but I just want to be clear on that because I don't want you to be unclear on that either. Those are my recommendations as possible reads for the Mardi Gras Readathon. Again, we start Tuesday, the 4th of February. It goes on to Tuesday, the 4th of March, because February and March always have the same days except for leap years. We're going to have sprints. We're going to have fun. We're going to have the Discord channel, which I have fixed the link to. So you should go ahead and go in the description box and join my Discord, and you'll find the Mardi Gras Readathon category, and we'd love to have you there. And I'd love to know what books you're reading for the Mardi Gras Readathon, whether you post them in Discord or whether you post them here in the comments. It doesn't matter to me. I just love to hear and see what you're reading. And I might pick something from your TBR that I haven't heard of before, so that would be fun. But I hope you enjoyed these titles. I hope you'll take a look at some of them. And as always, laissez les bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. Bye, readers.